Excuse me, old-timer. This is a United States Marine Corps live-fire range, not a public park for your plinking. The voice was sharp, laced with the kind of unearned arrogance that only a young officer who had never been truly tested could possess. Captain Evans stood with his hands on his hips, his perfectly pressed Marpat uniform a stark contrast to the faded flannel shirt and worn jeans of the man he was addressing. Two fresh-faced lieutenants flanked him like bookends, their expressions mirroring their captain's condescending smirk. The old man, who looked to be pushing 80, didn't flinch. He simply turned his head slowly, his pale blue eyes taking in the officer's polished boots, the gleaming captain's bars on his collar, and the palpable impatience radiating from him. The old man, Samuel Keene, had been speaking quietly with the range safety officer, a staff sergeant who now looked deeply uncomfortable, caught between a visiting civilian and a notoriously hot-headed company commander. "I have permission, son," Sam said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp, softened by a slight southern drawl. He held up a simple, plastic-laminated card. Evans didn't even glance at it. He let out a short, derisive laugh. "Permission? What is that? Your senior citizen's discount card." "Sergeant," he snapped, turning to the RSO. "I want this man and his antique." He gestured dismissively at the long, canvas-wrapped object at Sam's feet. "Off my range. We have qualifications to run." The staff sergeant shifted his weight. "Sir, his paperwork seems to be in order. He's cleared for lane 12". Evans's face darkened. For a captain to be questioned, however meekly, by an NCO in front of his subordinates was an intolerable breach of the natural order. He snatched the card from Sam's hand. The lamination was yellowed with age, the typewritten font faded. It bore the eagle, globe, and anchor, but it looked ancient. "This thing is probably older than I am. It's a relic, just like you. I'm in charge here, and I'm saying you're not shooting today. Go home and watch your stories, Grandpa." Sam Keene's gaze never wavered. He simply held out his hand to retrieve his card. There was no anger in his eyes, only a profound weariness, the look of a man who had seen this brand of youthful folly 1,000 times before. "The card is valid," he stated, not as a plea, but as a fact. "I just need the lane for a little while. I won't be in your way." This quiet dignity seemed to infuriate Captain Evans even more. He wanted a reaction: anger, fear, submission. He was getting none of it. He wanted to assert his authority, to make an example of this strange old man for his junior officers. He saw the canvas-wrapped rifle case, and an idea, cruel and public, formed in his mind. "You know what?" Evans said, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "I'll make you a deal. You seem to think you're quite the shooter with that museum piece." He pointed downrange, far past the standard 500-yard targets. In the shimmering distance, almost invisible to the naked eye, were the tiny, specialized steel targets used for the advanced scout sniper course. They were impossibly small, set at ranges of 800, 900, even 1,000 yards. "You see that steel silhouette out there? The one at 1,000 yards?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You put a single round on that target, and I will personally apologize, and then I'll carry your gear back to your car for you." The lieutenant chuckled. It was a laughable proposition. The target was a mere speck. The wind was gusting unpredictably across the range, and the old man was holding a rifle that looked like it belonged over a fireplace. "But when you miss," Evans continued, leaning in close, "and you will miss, you will pack your junk, get in your rust bucket car, and you will never show your face on my range again. Do we have a deal?" The staff sergeant RSO stepped forward tentatively. "Captain, with all due respect, that's the final qualification target for the advanced course. We have Marines with $500,000 worth of rifle and glass who can't reliably hit that." "It's not a fair challenge, sir." Evans shot him a venomous look. "Are you questioning my orders, Staff Sergeant?" The NCO's jaw tightened, and he took a step back. "No, sir." All eyes fell on Sam. He looked downrange, his eyes squinting against the sun. He seemed to be considering the wind, the distance, the sheer impossibility of the task. A long moment passed. Then, he looked back at the smug captain and gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Just one?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You just want me to hit it once?" The sheer audacity of the question hung in the air. Captain Evans, momentarily taken aback, recovered with a scoff. "Yeah, Grandpa. Just one. I don't have all day to watch you waste ammunition. He waved a hand magnanimously. The range is yours. Knock yourself out. With a shared smirk, Evans and his lieutenants stepped back to a covered area, grabbing a set of high-powered binoculars to better enjoy the old man's imminent failure. The staff sergeant, looking mortified, approached Sam. Sir, you don't have to do this. I can call the range control office. Sam held up a hand, silencing him. It's all right, son. Just call the line hot for me when I'm ready. He knelt down with a slight groan, his old joints protesting. He carefully untied the canvas wrap, his movements slow but deliberate, economical. There was no fumbling, no hesitation. Each fold of the canvas was pulled back with a practiced efficiency that spoke of decades of repetition. Inside rested not a hunting rifle, but a piece of history. It was a Remington 700, its wooden stock dark and smooth with age, worn in all the right places. It was topped with a long, external adjustment unertl scope, a design that hadn't been standard issue for 50 years. It was an M40, the rifle carried by Marine Scout snipers in the jungles of Vietnam. To the young officers watching, it was an antique. To a man who knew what he was looking at, it was a perfectly preserved instrument of deadly precision. Sam reached into a small leather pouch and produced a single round of ammunition. He didn't pull it from a box. It was a handload, meticulously crafted. He chambered the round, the bolt sliding home with a solid, satisfying click. He ignored the shooting bench, instead laying a small, worn piece of canvas on the ground and settling into the prone position. He did it with a fluid grace that belied his age, becoming one with the earth. He didn't use a laser rangefinder or a handheld weather station like the modern snipers. He simply lay there, motionless, for a full minute, his cheek pressed against the worn wood of the stock. He was feeling the wind on his face, watching the distant mirage dance above the ground, reading the subtle sway of the tall grass. He was communing with the elements in a way no digital sensor could replicate. Evans grew impatient. Any decade now, old-timer, he shouted. Sam didn't respond. He had gone somewhere else, a place of intense focus where the outside world ceased to exist. There was only him, the rifle, the air, and the target. He let out a long, slow breath, his finger taking up the slack on the trigger. The world seemed to hold its breath with him. Then, the rifle cracked, a sharp, authoritative report that was deeper and richer than the sound of the modern rifles. The recoil pushed the rifle back into his shoulder, and he absorbed it effortlessly, his eye never leaving the scope to watch the vapor trail of the bullet arc across the immense distance. A long, silent second passed. Then another. Downrange, a faint ping echoed back, almost lost in the wind. Captain Evans, who had the high-powered binoculars trained on the target, froze. His knuckles were white. He lowered the glasses, stared at them as if they were faulty, and raised them again. The two lieutenants looked at him, confused by his silence. What is it, sir? Did he even hit the berm? One of them asked, a snicker in his voice. Evans didn't answer. He just stood there, his mouth slightly agape. The staff sergeant RSO, who had been watching through the powerful spotting scope on its tripod, finally spoke, his voice filled with a mixture of shock and reverence. Impact, he breathed. Sweet mother. Impact. Dead center. The lieutenants scrambled for their own binoculars. On the distant steel plate, a tiny, fresh mark gleamed in the sun, precisely in the center of the silhouette's chest. A cold bore shot. The first, most difficult shot of the day, from a 50-year-old rifle, fired by an 80-year-old man, at 1,000 yards, in a shifting wind. It wasn't just improbable, it was impossible. The air on the firing line grew thick, with unspoken questions. The casual mockery had evaporated, replaced by a stunned, unnerving silence. Sam Keene operated the bolt with practiced ease, the spent brass casing ejecting and spinning through the air with a soft metallic sound as it landed on the canvas beside him. He pushed himself up slowly, first to his knees, then to his feet. He looked over at the three statuesque officers. You said one, he said, his voice flat, without a hint of triumph. Captain Evans finally found his voice, but the confident baritone was gone, replaced by a strained, defensive rasp. That was a fluke. A lucky shot. There's no way you can do that again. He was desperate now, his entire world of rigid certainty shaken to its core. He pointed to another, even more diabolical target. The hostage target. 900 yards. Put one through the kill zone without touching the hostage silhouette. Do that. This was a test of supreme precision, with a margin of error of less than an inch. A single gust of wind, a tremor in the hand, and it would be a failure. It was not a challenge, it was an accusation. He was accusing Sam of being a fraud. Sam simply nodded. He knelt, chambered another round, and settled back into his position. This time, there was no long wait. He aimed, breathed, and fired. The sequence was so smooth it was almost a single, fluid motion. Again, the crack, the pause, and the faint, beautiful ping from downrange. The RSO stared through his scope, speechless. He just shook his head slowly, looking over at Evans with wide eyes. Evans didn't need the confirmation. He had seen the puff of dust from the impact, a perfect hole appearing in the small, designated circle of the hostile target, mere inches from the no-shoot area. "All right," Sam said, already on his feet. "My turn." Before a stunned Evans could process what that meant, Sam pointed to a series of 5 reactive targets, each the size of a dinner plate, scattered at different, unknown distances. "Call them," Sam said. Confused, Evans stammered. "What?" "Call a target," Sam repeated patiently. "Left to right, right to left." "Your choice." Still reeling, Evans pointed numbly. "Far right, crack ping." Before the echo of the shot had faded, Sam had already worked the bolt and was on the next target. "Next," he said. "Middle, crack ping. Far left, crack ping. Second from left, crack ping. Second from right, crack ping." 5 shots, 5 targets, 5 perfect hits, in less than 30 seconds. He was operating the bolt-action rifle with the speed and efficiency of a semi-automatic. He wasn't just a marksman. He was a master, an artist working in a medium of brass and gunpowder. The firing range, once filled with the arrogant chatter of the young officers, had fallen completely, deathly silent, save for the whistling of the wind. Just as Evans was trying to form a coherent thought, a black government vehicle came crunching up the gravel road behind the firing line, stopping a respectful distance away. The passenger door opened, and a man in a crisp, perfectly tailored uniform stepped out. On his collar were the silver eagles of a full colonel. He was tall, imposing, and his face was a mask of stern authority. It was Colonel Marks, the base commander. Evans and his lieutenants immediately snapped to rigid attention, their hearts pounding in their chests. A visit from the base CO on the range was never a good thing. But the colonel didn't even look at them. His eyes were fixed on the old man in the flannel shirt. He strode forward purposefully, his boots crunching on the gravel, and stopped directly in front of Sam Keene. Then he did something that shattered Captain Evans's entire understanding of the Marine Corps hierarchy. Colonel Marks, the commander of all of Marine Corps Base Quantico, braced to the position of attention and rendered a crisp, perfect salute to the old civilian. "Gunny Keene," the colonel said, his voice resonating with a deep, genuine respect. "It's an honor, sir. I saw your name on the range schedule and wanted to come down and pay my respects. I hope my officers haven't been giving you any trouble." Sam returned a slow, tired salute. "They were just being cautious, Colonel. No harm done." The blood drained from Captain Evans's face. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. "Colonel, sir," he stammered, his voice barely a squeak. I was unaware of this gentleman's status. He's a civilian." Colonel Marks finally turned his gaze on Evans, and the temperature on the range seemed to drop 20 degrees. His eyes were like chips of ice. "Captain," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "this gentleman is Gunnery Sergeant Samuel T. Keene, retired. Does that name mean anything to you?" Evans shook his head, his mind a complete blank. "No, sir." The colonel's expression was a mixture of disappointment and fury. "Then you are more ignorant than I thought possible. You are standing on the ground he sanctified. You are teaching from a book he wrote." Gunnery Sergeant Keene was one of the first 5 instructors at the USMC Scout Sniper School, established right here in 1966. He personally field-tested and refined the rifle he's holding. The impossible targets you had him shoot at? He designed them as graduation exercises 50 years ago to test the absolute best of the best. He stepped forward until he was inches from Evans's face. "That laminated card you mocked? It's a lifetime pass granting him unrestricted access to any Marine Corps facility in the world. It was signed by the 24th Commandant of the Marine Corps. He doesn't need your permission to be here, Captain. We need his." Evans felt dizzy, the world tilting on its axis. He looked at Sam, at the kind, weathered face and the calloused hands that had held this rifle for half a century. He was seeing him clearly for the first time, not as a frail old man, but as a living monument. The colonel wasn't finished. He gestured toward the lane Sam was using. And do you know why he requested lane 12, Captain? Do you have any idea why he comes here, on this specific day, every year? Evans could only shake his head, mute with shame. Because lane 12 is unofficially dedicated to Sergeant Carlos Henderson, his spotter, who was killed in action in the Ashau Valley on this very day in 1969. He comes here to fire one shot, in memory of his friend. A private, sacred ritual that you and your arrogance trampled all over. The weight of it all was crushing. The disrespect, the public humiliation, the sacrilege. It was all too much. But the final, devastating blow was yet to come. The colonel turned his steely gaze to the staff sergeant RSO. Staff Sergeant, I am going to ask you a question, and I want a straight answer. Why did you stand by and allow a commissioned officer to publicly berate and humiliate a recipient of the Medal of Honor? The words hung in the air, sucking all the remaining oxygen out of the atmosphere. Medal of Honor. The highest, most sacred award for valor. Evans staggered back a step as if he'd been physically struck. He looked at Sam, at the unassuming old man who had endured his taunts with such quiet grace, and felt a wave of nausea and self-loathing so profound it threatened to bring him to his knees. He saw it all now, the quiet confidence, the unshakable calm, the absolute mastery. This wasn't an old man. This was a giant. He stumbled forward, his polished boots clumsy on the gravel. His face was pale, his eyes wide with horror and regret. Sir, he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Gunnery Sergeant Keene, sir. There are no words. My conduct was unforgivable. I am so profoundly sorry. Sam Keene looked at the broken young officer for a long moment. There was no anger in his eyes, no satisfaction, only a deep, abiding sadness. He reached down and picked up the first spent casing, the one from the 1,000-yard shot. The brass was still warm. He held it out to the captain. The uniform doesn't make the Marine, son, Sam said, his quiet voice cutting through the wind. The Marine makes the uniform. Never forget that. Evans took the small brass casing as if it were a holy relic, his hand trembling. Tears welled in his eyes and streamed unashamedly down his cheeks. Sam then looked at the other casings, the ones from the subsequent shots. The first shot, he said, his voice heavy with memory. That one was for Carlos. The rest were for you. A lesson. Don't ever mistake age for weakness. And don't you ever forget the giants whose shoulders you stand upon. Colonel Marks stepped forward. Captain Evans, you and your lieutenants will report to my office at 0600 tomorrow morning. We are going to have a very long, very detailed discussion about leadership, humility, and the history of this corps. A history you have clearly forgotten. Dismissed, the three young officers, utterly shattered, rendered shaky salutes, and practically fled from the range. The colonel then turned to Sam, his demeanor softening completely. Gunny, I am truly sorry for their behavior. Sam gave a slight shake of his head. They're young. They still think the world is what it looks like on the surface. They'll learn. He turned and looked back downrange, his gaze distant, seeing something far beyond the steel targets. He saw green jungles, felt the oppressive heat, and heard the ghost of a young man's laughter at his side. He had completed his pilgrimage. He had honored his friend. And perhaps, in the process, he had forged a better Marine from the ashes of a young captain's pride.